Welcome to Corwin's Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast with hosts Peter DeWitt and Michael Nelson. This podcast is from education leaders for education leaders. Every week, Peter, Mike, and our guests get together to share ideas, put research into practice, and ensure that every student is learning not by chance, but by design.
Michael, here we are for another episode of Leaders Coaching Leaders. How are you?
I'm doing great, Peter. Although, at the time of this recording, it really has shifted from summer to fall for me in Washington State. It is cold all of a sudden.
Oh, I am sorry to hear that because it is 73 degrees here. Oh, but I'm feeling empathetic.
Thank you.
Maybe it just didn't come out that way when I said.
Well, we have a great podcast, right?
We do. I love how you're like ready to move into that, right? You're like, okay, enough of this small talk. Yes, we have Dr. Kate Anderson Foley, and she has a new book out with Corwin. It just came out a month ago or so. Radically Excellent School Improvement. And for those of you that don't know Kate, you can actually go to her website, the Education Policy and Practice Group, but widely known for her work in breaking down barriers for children who have historically been marginalized. She began her career as a special education teacher, pioneering inclusive practices. And as assistant superintendent for the Illinois State Board of Education, she oversaw services to more than 852 school districts, charter schools, non-public schools, and the Department of Juvenile Justice. Really interesting to talk to her.
It was. We just had a great global conversation with her. Her book itself actually breaks down school improvement process into 6 steps. And, from the board level to the administration into teaching. And she has at the core of everything, which is important to you and I, right at the center, are the students. And, from the cover of the book, everything represents that piece. And, we didn't go specifically into her 6 steps within the book, but you can will feel the flow of those 6 steps that she highlights through our conversation.
Yeah, definitely interesting to talk to. So look forward to all of our listeners listening to Dr. Kate Foley, Anderson Foley. Enjoy the podcast.
Picture yourself popularly known among staff members as the reliable go-to person who makes meaningful change happen. This is possible when you equip yourself with robust strategies and tools from Corwin's leadership workshops. Sign up today at corwin.com.
Kate Anderson Foley, welcome to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to meet you. And Michael and I have been looking forward to talking to you. We've gotten to know you through social media over the past few months, which has been really good. We can stalk each other in a very polite, professional way.
Exactly.
So congratulations on your new book with Corwin. It's called Radically Excellent Schools. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to writing the book on Radically Excellent Schools.
So Radically Excellent School Improvement, keeping students at the center of it all, is really about my cumulative years leading school districts and then State Department, and my tiptoeing into the waters at the federal level. And it's around comprehensively putting strategic planning in motion. It's not just, I am not a fan of the 40-page document that sits in the shelf, either hardcore or virtual. I'm really focused on incremental change and supporting the schools who are implementing those changes. What leads me to the radically excellent side of things is that there's a relentless focus and drive that is keeping all the adults in the organization focused on the students. So students are at the center of it all, meaning at every decision point along the way. And then within that, there is an intentionality between and among all the departments. So interconnectedness. So when we do strategic planning, we build in the interdependencies. For example, well, how is teaching and learning coupled with the business department, HR, things like that. And so, again, throughout my work in my professional roles before I moved into my private practice, has been around a strength-based system of support and a strength-based, not for some, but for all. And again, how do we put this into play? And so that's a long story about, why I decided to do this book and the title of it, because we can go into the details between, what that system looks like, coaching, all of that.
No, we will definitely get there. And I know that you're speaking Michael's language when you say
Okay.
that whole focus on students. As soon as I heard you say that, I'm like, oh, Michael's going to be following up with a question.
You'll have a question or two, right?
Yes, I just there's so much about the language that you use that's very similar. So, I was a school superintendent in a district right outside of Seattle, Washington for 14 years, and I just the language that you use of the interconnectedness of in and between, all of that language is so critically important, whether you think of within the system, outside the system, including communities and families and all of those pieces. But the keeping the students at the center is something that is threaded throughout, no matter where I have Googled or stalked you, that seems to be really at the forefront of who you are. Even the cover of your book, the
Mhm.
way it flows of the showing to me, the cover of your book shows the interconnectedness totally with the way it flows back and forth, but and then in each center is, the circle of with the students, and I think that just is a strong representation of the vision of the book. But share, I know people say it, but how, in your work, how have you seen people put that into practice, the vision of putting students at the center?
So I'll give you a quick example. I'm working with a charter school network right now,
Mm,
and we did strategic planning, and we started with that. Like, who are our students? Who are they? All the demographic, all the profile, whatever you would like to say about it. But who are our students? And
mhm,
do you believe that they are capable of learning? It sounds like such a simple question or such a yada, yada, yada question, right? But
mhm,
really, it reveals a lot about the organization and the people within the organization. So when people say to me, "Well, yeah, I think most of them can do it," yeah, like ear kind of tilts, right? When they say, "Yes, we know we have to do better." There we go. Now I can pinpoint in. And then organizing from an appreciative inquiry. And that's my process. From a strength base, what are you doing well? What area that you'd say you're doing well in? And let's start to build from there. And then put in all of our students. From there, it's that idea of, and I'm going to pull this up if you haven't already, thought about asking me about it, is the double helix system of
mm,
support. I would say this is it. This is the revolutionary piece
mhm,
because in the past, and it's still current, I even, contributed language to say, don't do RTI and MTSS in this form, that the triangle goes up, or points down. No matter, it's funneling students instead of flipping it to say, here's all the students, here's the full continuum of students. So, what are we, the adult, going to do to put in an intervention or strategy or enrichment that's going to move the student? And therein lies the difference. Because instead of identifying the students, we are identifying the intervention. And from that perspective, that's where we keep students at the center of all of our decisions, be it lesson planning, be it working together, like comprehensively situating the adults, and then support, of course, through all the, you can call them professional learning communities. Some people call them teacher-based teams, whatever that configuration is, then the questions go to that. What do we want students to know? And then how will we know when they've gotten it? Well, what do we do for the students who haven't gotten it? And I always put a big capital Y-E-T, yet. Doesn't mean they can't. What are we, the adult, going to do to ensure that they have learned it? And then finally, what do we do for students who already have it? It might be bored out of their mind or totally checked out, right? And then become behavior problems as an example, right? So
Right.
what are we doing to engage our students? So that's just a different way, but it is the way. And I didn't just pull this out. This is what I put in practice throughout my career and how I've been working with others in that. So this is a formalized way. I'd love to revolutionize education in a way. Post-pandemic, we must do something differently.
Hmm.
So I like that very much, and the idea of students at the center really important. And I loved what you were saying earlier about the business office, because that's some work recently that has come up. Like,
Oh,
where do they play a role in this? But I want to get back to, you were talking about the interventions in place, and one of the questions that came to mind, that's something Michael and I kind of are confronted with all the time, no matter where we are in the world, actually, is the idea that they will say that's all well and good, but we can't even get teachers in the classroom, or the teachers coming out of school in their pre-service program
yeah.
are not, they're not always prepared to do this work. We've compiled data from hundreds of schools, and one of the biggest focuses that schools have are tier one interventions, because they just don't naturally, I guess there are just teachers that don't just naturally have that experience to be able to do that work. So within your framework that you're talking about, how do those, it's
Mhm.
almost like you're differentiating for the adults, right? Because you're going to have those seasoned teacher that know how to do them. Then you're going to have these, maybe you mentioned charter schools, but what we see is a lot of emergency certified teachers that
Yep,
aren't
that's
aren't even exposed to this language. So how
yeah,
does that work with the schools that you're working with?
yep. So you said a lot of there. I'm going to try to unpack some of it.
Yeah,
First,
sorry, it was long-winded, wasn't it?
that's fine. That's fine. First and foremost, I have advocated that teachers come out with dual certification.
Mhm.
They should come out with not just one undergraduate class of this is special ed.
Yeah.
you know, they need to understand how to universally and comprehensively put a lesson together for all students. That's one. Two, they need to be able to see themselves, that co-design and co-deliver of instructional practices coupled with behavioral interventions as well, or, however you want to term it, tier one, I call it universal.
Mhm.
They need to have the understanding of the why. And so many programs don't do that. I have great experience with teachers who are on emergency certification, alternate pathways, and you're right, they don't know what they don't know. But within that improvement process, and I'll kind of go back to one of my examples of when I was working with this group of strategic planning, but within that strategic plan, district overall, all the school improvement plans are aligned
Mhm.
because it cascades down. And then we ask ourselves these questions of, so what do the adults need? What do the teachers need? Related service providers, what have you. And that's the professional development and coaching support that goes with. I'm a big believer in building the capacity of the principals because they are very important. But oftentimes principals don't have that skill set as well. So that's why coaching is critical. The knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions to look at things in an objective way, understand the data, but then be able to support and coach the teachers and the teacher teams along that way. And that's where I have seen just like almost like a vacuum. You're like, oh, you've got PLCs, great. That's great. And, let the facilitator do their thing. Yeah, send me a report instead of saying, no, 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 flip it. We are in the business of ensuring that students learn. So I, as the leader, be it a superintendent or principal, what have you, need to know where students are. What does the data say? But I use a root of the root analysis. So many school teams stop at, here's the cause. Well, let's address the cause. But instead, go to the lower cause, go to the deeper cause. Okay, so students aren't improving. Why is it? They don't come to class. Okay, why is that? They're on their cell phones. Why is that? And we dig down deep. This is a very current problem. Absenteeism, and now school districts are banning cell phones.
Mhm.
Okay. Question, how are you going to engage students? They weren't engaged before.
Mhm.
They've come back to us socially and emotionally stunted for a wide variety of factors. So then the teachers who didn't know what to do before are now given, and by the way, enforced the no cell phone.
Mhm.
And some cases in some districts, and probably America is a little bit more resistant of how are you utilizing artificial intelligence? Not to swap out work, but to engage our students.
Mhm.
And also think about the amount of newcomers
Mhm.
and the amount of students who are learning English as, a second language, and students with disabilities and others who need to see themselves in the learning. So my work in this book really digs down deep into that. And I give examples for professional learning communities. I give examples for the co-designing. And then I pull it really far down into the IEP. Because again, I mentioned, this book has a twist in that I highlight the Supreme Court case of Andrew F. and the higher standard. Yet when districts say, yeah, we're doing that. We have the highest. We've always had a high standard. Great. How do you know? What's your evidence of impact?
Mhm.
Right? And then all of a sudden they say, well, okay, all right. Maybe we need more help with that.
Mhm.
And so I show people how to do that. And then through it, coach them. So here's the detail of some of the special ed. And Michael, I'm sure you know this very well. Special education is very costly, and that's the additional cost, but the litigation is extremely costly.
Mhm.
And it also can permanently hurt a relationship between the school and the family, which I think is very important that we repair. And so when you get those conditions right, everyone wins.
Mhm.
Right? Because we've kept students at the center. What do you need? Ambitious education. How are you going to get it? That's an access and opportunity. And then how are you going to know that you're making an impact? Evidence.
Mhm.
And that's the professional development, the coaching that we all need to do.
Thank you. You're right. Your book really details the processes and procedures, and really makes you think as a leader about your own system and ways to make improvements in within that. I would love to know. I'm sure in all your travels and feedback on your book and that you have some maybe examples of hope when you talk with school superintendents, principals, districts, and you think, "Oh, there's hope there." When you
Yep.
get that feeling, what are
Yeah.
they doing
At
in
first,
in story format? What are they doing that
yeah,
gives you hope tied to all the procedures and processes that you outlined in.
right. You made me think of a district that when I was in Singapore this spring,
Mm,
one of the schools in Australia looked at the equity audit, and we besides keynotes and all that, we had master classes, and I took them through the equity audit in relation to the system and et cetera.
Sure.
And when they looked at the data, they were very honest. They said, "Oh, wow, we're not doing what we need to do." But then the two people were talking to one another, because one was the director of student services, and she goes, "We can do this." And she started to talk, and her eyes just went like that, like, "We've got this. We can do this."
Mhm.
And by putting that practice into play, my hope is that they're doing it this year and that they're making a difference. The other, when I give hope, is when because I work with boards of ed too, right? Boards of director, and they're
Very
going,
important.
yeah, yeah. And I take them through certain things, and they feverishly take notes. Like, I like what Kate said on that. Like, we got to dig in deeper on that piece of it. Those things really make me happy, because my North Star has always been advocating for children and youth who have been voiceless. And that's just the way it is. And so when, if I have any say in any way to have improvement for kids, I'm all about it. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be adults a whole lot longer than they're going to be in school. And the trajectory of a child's life can actually change by what we do. You, me, the community. That gives me hope.
I think, I mean, you're definitely speaking my language there, because I'm a former inclusion teacher and elementary school principal. But, when I started teaching in a high poverty city school, I had a co-teacher who was a special ed teacher, and we really got rid of the status piece. You're not going to call me the general ed teacher, and you're not going to call her the special ed teacher, and, those kind of things. And I think people miss a real opportunity, because still to this day, and that was back in the mid to late 90s,
Right.
special ed kids were being pulled out into the hallway to be taught, and it was like, this is never going to happen. It's not
That's
going to
right.
happen.
That's
So,
right.
but still to this day, you see those kind of things happening, and it's sad to me, because people are missing out on an opportunity. I learned so much by co-teaching with the person that I co-taught with. That lessons for me still to this day as a facilitator. One of the things you said, though, kind of, I want to go back to, and I said I was going to, the whole business office idea.
Yep.
So often the business office seems like you might have the director of business or the superintendent of business that's sitting at the board meeting, but they don't always feel like they're a part of the decision making that
Right.
happens within the schools. And I actually just had this the other day with a group in Ontario too, because they're all working on collective leader efficacy with us. And so when you specifically mentioned the business office, what are some things you can say right now for people who think that their business office is involved because the administrator shows up to a meeting, but they might not necessarily be involved in the ways that you think they should be?
Yep. So I've always invited myself to the business office. And because, again, some districts were better than others as far as were we siloed to the point of nobody really knew what anyone was doing. And so I always felt it was my duty and responsibility to make sure that they know what I'm working on, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, a special education, all grants and everything else. But it was a way for me to introduce my beliefs and who I am and how I'm moving the departments or how I'm moving the school district. And at the same time, it was a way for me to gather information. Do they have the skill set that they need? Are they legally literate and financially literate for the things that we need to work on? So the fiscal, the human, and the resources, they all need to align. That is part of my equity audit as well. And the work, forth after that. And when we did that, and for example, like now when we've been doing that, the department is actually at the strategic planning, been at the summer institutes. Like they're now saying, oh, I see. And when you and I share a goal, So for example, under, I'm going to use responsive classroom as one of the tools. So it's a curriculum, it's, all the behavior modifications, social, emotional, et cetera, et cetera. When you and I know what this is about, then the financial pieces would make more sense.
Mm.
Here's some of the buzz that's going around lately. Science of reading. Okay. I'm going to be agnostic on this. But they have to understand then what are the structures that I may need in the Office of Teaching and Learning to make sure that it's done with fidelity, and any training, any, any registration fees, things like that. Business services has often been in the past. I have been out since 2018 from the public side. So maybe some things have changed, but there's always this knock of you spend too much money in this.
Mhm.
What does this have to do with that? Versus understanding the whole. And so when you create a holistic, comprehensive system where they have responsibility for part of that goal, then there's an invested interest to say, so why are we spending that, or why do we need a half-time person or a full-time? It makes more sense because it's then shared accountability. So the design, the details of it, but shared accountability for me is everything. It's not just this or that. It's not just you or you. It's us. And then how are we, again, I always ask, how are we, the adults, ensuring that students have good outcomes?
Mhm.
So it turns that into the we in a very real way, instead of, well, I'm the treasurer, or I'm the business department. Just report, you know what I mean? It takes away from that siloed piece to, oh, I see how this works.
Mm.
Here's another example. Um, Culturally responsiveness in the sense of who's in our school, do they represent, how do we bring materials and et cetera, beliefs and to that. Well, I would always partner with HR because we needed to have better interview questions,
Mhm.
better scenarios. It was a way for us to assess, we want the best, we just don't want somebody. And it was also a way for me, because I was a chief in large urban, it was a way for me to assess what kind of support are we going to have to provide this teacher. Great teacher, like brand new or what have you, but there's areas of support. What are they? And it was a way for me to do that, and
Mm.
as well as address bias.
I you're just taking me back to so many reflections during my tenure as superintendent, to be honest, Kate. I just like, wow. And when you were describing the business office and the systems, for me, and I actually would bring the visual. Do you know it's a ball, but it's plastic, and it's plastic web, and it can come to this little
Oh yeah,
tiny,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
tiny,
Right.
tiny, like, baseball size, but then it can
And pop
expand
out.
into
Yep.
a big balloon, and it's all interconnected, it's all a web, but I would describe our school district as this ball, and we are all interconnected in this big ball, and you see all of the different plastic pieces, the open air plastic pieces and the different colors come together, and the business office is not a separate ball, but in this huge web. But as the ball would shrink, when it would get to the core baseball sized piece, that's the students. We're all interconnected tightly around students. And so this visual graphic,
It's a great,
it's like, I hadn't thought about that in years. You just
but
described that.
it still applies, right?
It's
And
still, yes.
yeah, for sure. That's a great visual. I'll probably keep that forever now
Yeah.
myself.
Well, use it
Um,
for all you want. But uh,
but there's
I,
intentionality about that. Therein lies the difference. You brought up intentionality of how it all works together. There
Mhm.
are many that just say it's this, kind of like the hierarchy of organizational charts.
Mhm.
Those need to be flattened. Our new millennials, our new people don't see hierarchy the way maybe people of a certain age do.
Yep.
And that's okay, but they need to make sense of it. I've done some writing on, how coaching is really, really important now in this world of volatility and uncertainty and all the complexities and ambiguity. That is
Mm,
the world in which we live in right now, and probably will be for a long, long time. And that notion um, has applied to business, but it's never applied to education.
right.
No, education has always been all of the volatile and, ambiguity, like all of that complex. I often say education organizations are the most complex political businesses on the planet.
Mm.
Let's understand it, and then let's roll up our sleeves.
Well, Peter, I have a tangent question, but I don't
Okay.
want to ask my tangent question
Oh,
without giving you free reign to
no, no, no. This is a good way to start to close out. I can't wait to hear this tangent. I don't know if you've ever brought that up before. So I'm excited to hear it.
Well, Kate, I don't know if you know this about me, but I love children's books, and I have used children's books as a way to facilitate adult learning since I became an administrator over 30 years ago. And my collection of children's books is quite large,
I've been to his house. He's telling the truth there.
and I just use them because I think they have strong messages not only for students and kids when you read them to your to classes, but the messages that sometimes I wanted to have across my system um, it comes across much more poignantly in a children's book than if I would have just stood up and made a speech around that same subject. So you wrote a children's book, which I'm just really intrigued with. Ida finds her voice.
Mhm.
Would you, in all that you do, why a children's book? Why this subject? How does it interconnect to the book that you just wrote for Corwin Press? Tell us a little bit about that as we close out this interview.
Well, thank you for asking me about that. So I wrote, I, I've had Ida on my mind for since 2017, 2016, 2017. And it was as a result of this increased divisiveness and hatred almost. And in my role, and I was living in Chicago at the time, take the trains to work, right? That's how we commute.
Sure.
And I noticed, and of course, my work at the schools, the district level, um, there was a lot of children in need. And then I looked deeper and I really saw the adults in need. And IDA was a way to, what you just eloquently said, was to get to not only the children, because we need to make sure our children are okay.
Mhm.
Whoever they are, however they are, they need to be okay because they're children. The other side of that is, how do we help parents and how do we help adults have difficult conversations? So you might not agree with whatever, the thing was, but we need to be able to say, this is a human being. And so Ida goes through a series of things that are disturbing, not for her, but the people looking at her, or as a result of the adults doing something. And she's trying to make sense of it.
Mhm.
And then there's a culminating event that happens at the park. And throughout her caring parents to talk about these things gave words to what she was feeling. And then at the end, very powerfully, joins others, adults who also have been marginalized, including all of our newcomers and our people with disabilities, people who might have different family makeup as other people, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs. All of those things are okay, even though you might not agree, but we all have a place in this planet, on this planet. And then how do we talk nicely and civilly? And how do we help kids make sense of very complex topics? But what I found is, I'm sure you too have found, our parents are younger, right? So they're the younger of the younger of the younger. And some of them have missed some of these things. And that it goes back to who I am personally and professionally. And that is, I'm a social justice warrior.
Mm. Well, thank you for that. And Michael, I like that tangent question that you asked. That was very good. And you know, thanks for being on the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast, Kate. You know, it sounds like you are doing fantastic work. And congratulations on the book, which is Radically Excellent School Improvement.
Mhm.
So congratulations on that. That's
Thank you
fantastic.
so much.
Well,
Thank you
thank
for
you for
having
being
me.
on the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to just share with you too and share with everybody.
All right, Peter, we just had a great conversation with Kate Anderson Foley and about her book, Radical Excellent School Improvement.
Yeah, and you know what I appreciate about her is that when she was talking about the way the book is put together, she really focused a lot, it seems, on systems. And that's something that can be missing from schools. Like, I think, you know, there's that balance between sort of the feeling that we get when we go into a school, and this is a strategy that we think can work, to maybe the other end of the spectrum where she is talking about systems and what to put in place and what this can look like, you know, the soup to nuts kind of version as far as professional development. I think, you know, where I wanted to ask a deeper question was just the whole idea of a lot of principals do feel like, hey, I would love to be able to do this work, but I don't even get time to think about it, or superintendents get the time to think about it because we have unfilled positions, and or we have emergency certified teachers. And you know, she definitely taught, she was able to speak to that too, which I appreciate.
Yeah, she really did champion that incremental change kind of philosophy that we've heard. There's definitely lots of books about
Mhm.
small changes, small habits that you can implement that cause the big ripple of change. But I just thought the part for me where I went back to my superintendent days, Peter, was when you really were talking about the business office and, not having them be a silo. And you brought it up a couple times throughout the podcast. And I think um, that is huge significance. Oftentimes, business leaders within our school systems um, do not necessarily come through the educational lens. They come through the business lens, and they are making sure that there's checks and balances in numbers, but not necessarily tied to what those checks and balances and numbers mean to programs and to what it means to students and staff, and how to bring them directly into the conversation so they're a part of it. They can have look-fors all the time, rather than just, a teaching and learning director going and begging for more money for maybe instructional materials.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely come up in conversation, the work that we've done. And I think one of the things I hope for when people listen to the podcast is just that idea of how do we involve the business office? You know, that equity audit, those kind of things are those things that we do as well. And what can we learn from them? And of course, we're always going to enjoy when somebody says evidence of impact, because that's the work that we do, and we're looking for evidence of impact. So that was important. But
Yeah,
as always, Michael, very good to see you. This is where you
absolutely.
say, "Oh, good to see you too, Peter." You just
Oh, okay. Let me get that
you
cue
said
back again.
absolutely. That's how you answer that. It's
Okay.
really good to see you, Michael. Absolutely. It's good to see you.
It's always good to see myself. No, Peter, it's great to see you. A great conversation once again. Kate Anderson Foley, just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yes, and thank you everybody for listening. As always, we're looking for your feedback, but we're grateful that you took time to listen to our Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.